Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for your patience as we're getting started a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. Really appreciate you hanging in there with us. So excited to have you here. My name is Shannon C.L. Kearns, and it's my great joy to be hosting this panel tonight. I'm super excited about the conversation that we're about to have. I'm the Trans Advisory Council liaison at Mixed Blood Theater in Minneapolis, and I'm also the artistic director of Uprising Theater Company. Uprising produces work by trans and non-binary playwrights and focuses on increasing access for trans folks in all areas of theater. And tonight's panel brings together four incredible playwrights to talk about their work. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. I just want to let you know, if you've got questions that you want me to ask the panel throughout tonight's discussion, throw them in the chat or the comments, and we'll make sure that they get asked. I would love to bring on all of the panelists today. Thank you all for being here. As a group, we wanted to start out tonight by acknowledging the loss this week of trans elder, icon, and trailblazer Monica Roberts. Monica's work uplifted and centered her community, and her loss is just immeasurable. We wanted to start tonight by acknowledging her life and her impact on the world and giving thanks for all of the work that she has done. So thank you, Monica, for everything that you've done for your community. We love you and we will miss you, and we will carry on your work. I want to start tonight by having each panelist introduce themselves. And so to tell whatever you want about your identity and your work, that would be fantastic. Sharifa, I'm gonna ask if you would be willing to start us off, and then when you're done, you can pick the next person who goes.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharifa Yasmin. I use she, her pronouns. I am originally from Charleston, South Carolina. I am primarily a theater director who's also a playwright. I went to school in South Carolina and have worked in DC, Vermont, Kentucky, New York, all over New York. I tend to be really fascinated by the intersection of stories that involve trans and gender nonconforming people, as well as what it means to be Arab American. And Liana, if you want to go.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. And my name is Mashouk Mushtaq Dean. I go by Dean. I use he or they. I am trans, I'm queer, I'm South Asian American, I'm a person of faith, and probably many other things besides that I can't think of in the moment. I'm primarily a playwright. I am sometimes a performer, although reluctantly these days. And I also write in other forms more these days. But I think as we keep talking, we'll get into our work and stuff. So I'll leave it at that. And I'll hand it to Azure.
Hi, so I'm Azure D. Osborne Lee. My pronouns are he or they. That is my cat Cream Cheese. She'll probably keep doing that. I'm currently in Brooklyn, and but I'm originally from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Texas, sort of the Austin and Houston areas. Although I have family sort of all over Texas. So yeah, I mean, I wear a lot of hats. If the hat comes with enough of a stipend, I'll probably wear it. but primarily I work as a playwright. I guess also as a producer slash activist though. I'm also a performer. I do some like cross genre performing as well. So occasionally you'll see me in like new dance performances for some reason. Um, so yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all again for being here. I'd love to start out with a question. Anyone who has an answer ready to go can jump in. Um, I would love to know how your identity, and you can consider identity as broadly or as narrowly as you'd like. How does your identity inform or not inform the playwriting that you do?
For me, my identity is the driving force behind my playwriting. I sort of what I have found playwriting to be for me is like a way to work through my own like internal struggles with my identity, with my position within society, how I'm allowed to exist in my personal histories. And for me, what's really important about that is I never got to see my story told, as all the intersection identities that I hold as a trans woman, as an Arab woman, as a Muslim woman, um, and as a biracial person, I've never felt myself seen. And for me, part of the reason I became a director was to have autonomy over the stories that I told and to select who gets to tell these stories and bring authenticity to them. But even in that route, I still wasn't able to focus on stories that involve the intersection of my identities. So playwriting for me is so much driven by my need to like feel heard, to feel seen, and to hopefully have someone else who hasn't felt that before read my work or see my work and connect with that and say, oh my God, like I relate to that. That is an experience that I hold close to me that I haven't gotten to experience before. That's really important to me as a playwright.
Anyone else? How does your identity inform or not inform your writing?
I can go next. I think it's a lens. It's one of the lenses through which I work, and so I think many of my identities are part of the filter, which is me, which is the artist, and then that's how I view the world. I think earlier on I wrote particularly about being transgender, and I don't do that as much anymore, so it doesn't inform it in that particular way. Yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I also a dear friend of mine just texted me that my microphone wasn't going out to the stream before, so I have now fixed that. We threw together this replacement backup stream in about 2 minutes, so it took a little bit to get everything working, but I think we're back now. Hi, Liana Keys. The short version of my intro was, "Hi, I do everything other than dance. No one wants that." How trans identity informs my art. For me, it's how I got into writing because I was sick of either never seeing anyone who felt like me on stage, someone who felt like I felt, and then wanting to make those roles and make them to be, interesting and not trite and actually coming from a place of trans authenticity rather than like, here's what I think a trans person might be like if they were my fantasy of perfectly accessible and open about everything, but also sexy, which is where I find most like trans written or cis written trans characters often land. Um, Now I rarely write specifically transition stories or anything like that. I'm much more interested in putting trans people into stories that I find compelling, into situations that I find compelling, and seeing how their trans identity informs that and informs their relationship with other characters. But I never have the central arc of a play be, I am now going to be trans. All for me.
Yeah, I feel like, similar to what other folks said. I mean, I feel like um, mm, it's impossible to divorce my writing from my lived experience. Like I am the person that the writing is coming through. And I think actually, like, that's the case with any writing, like it's a myth for like folks to feel like, you know, the writer is separate from the writing. That's my political belief. Um, that being said, I think that um, the writing that I do is very much grounded in my personal experience. It's often takes place in the South or what feels like the American South, be it in this universe or in another one. Lots of trans characters, queer characters, just mostly Black people, but sometimes not Black people. Just being people. Like sometimes there's an explicitly trans narrative, sometimes there's not. Um, yeah, that's what I'll say for now.
For those of you that have been writing for a while, have you found that how your transness in particular, have you found that how that has changed how you've written over the years? So like, did you used to write a lot of trans characters or coming out stories and now you find yourself doing less of that, or has that shifted at all for you throughout the course of your writing career?
I find that I write about trans characters more now. I'm in a really interesting space where I transitioned about 2 years ago, and I was writing before that. Um, and it's funny because part of what was a bridge to realizing that I was trans was I was writing a trans character in a play that I was writing. And I was meeting with a trans actor because I wanted to make sure that I was bringing authenticity to the role. And he was telling me about his experience, and I was like, wait a minute. This feels familiar. And that began like that began a journey for me of like coming to terms with my transness. So for me, I found that I would sort of write trans characters as, I don't want to say side characters, but I didn't invest as much in them because I think I was still like figuring out who I was. And now for me, I've never written a coming out story, but for me, it's about like how a character's transness informs their experiences. And that for me comes from being like a non-cis passing trans woman. And like the fact that I am trans leads every single experience that I have in my life. And so when it comes to how being trans is involved in my storytelling, it's the driving force, only that it's the driving force of the character's experience. So it's never about them coming terms with their transness. It's almost about the other characters coming to terms with their transness.
Yeah, I was thinking about it and I thought like, yeah, I only have one real like trans coming out story, and that's Crooked Parts, which is in the anthology that Liana mentioned earlier. But then I thought about it and I was like, that's not actually a coming out story. Like not really. So yeah, I also started writing before I realized I was trans. I think that I probably had some idea um, that something was coming because I made the transition from acting primarily to playwriting because I knew that I wanted sort of less. I wanted people to be judging my body less, and I wanted to try a different form of storytelling um, than acting. So I tried playwriting, and it turned out I have a knack for it. So I sort of leaned into that. Um, yeah, trans people. It's funny. My mom is probably not watching this, but I will say my mom reads all my plays. Like she loves reading my stuff, but like I don't necessarily consider her my target audience. Like I will say that I don't feel like she likes all of my stuff, which is totally fine because like I mean, I'm not going to get into a long conversation about target audience and like, you know, the way that people receive your art and like whatever. But like uh yeah, I will say that I wrote a play The Beasts of Warren, which is kind of disjointed. It's experimental. I'm a new playwright. I consider myself to be experimental. And she was like, what role do the genders play? And I was just like, they don't. People just have the gender that they have. Like, it's not load bearing. And so, yeah, that's my world is full of trans and queer people. I'm a queer trans person. I basically only hang out with queer trans people. They're going to be there.
Can I just say how much I love gender is not load bearing? Like, what a wonderful phrase. Awesome. Um, I think I want to something that Sharif was talking about, like how other people react to the trans characters more so than like the trans people coming out or things like that. Very similarly, in the play that I'm contributing to this trans play anthology, the Methuen Drama Book of Trans Plays. Um, in that world, being gay is illegal, and we never talk about the status of trans people explicitly. And almost all of the notes that I get from like students or producers are like, but like if gay people aren't allowed, how can there be trans people? And I'm like, this is that perspective. I understand why that would be your one of the questions that you have for me, but I also need you to understand that like that's a very 101 cis centric way of like interpreting this art. And like honestly, part of what I like about my writing, particularly my later writing, is that it is, look, anyone can watch it, but it's for trans people. We deserve it.
Love that.
I would say my earlier work was more autobiographical, and so more about being transgender or how that intersected with being South Asian. But in all of my plays are really different in terms of content and form, even if there are some thematic threads. And so now I don't find myself writing as much about trans characters, but thinking of those forces in the world, like how are masculine energies and feminine energies at war with each other in our world? How do they play out? Because I find both of them in myself. So then how do I take those forces and play them out in the world and see how they hurt each other sometimes, or help each other, or are out of balance? So yeah, so it's changed a lot, I think, in terms of my time writing.
I would love to hear. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, to go off something Liana said, I think one of my frustrations as a trans playwright is my work is for trans people, but then the people who are deciding if it gets produced are cis, and the experiences that they have filter the play in a different way than I think that it filters for other trans people. And that's been sort of the hardest part of coming to terms with my writing, is like, how can I influence cis people to see this the way that it's meant to be seen by them, even though it's not meant for them. And that's sort of a constant conflict that I come across as a playwright.
I resonate so strongly with that. And I want to kind of follow up on that and ask all of you, do you feel that you struggle to get out from under the cis gaze as you write your plays?
I find for me, I'm always conscious of it. And there's this one short play I wrote that for me is so specific to trans experience, and I have faced like such difficulty in trying to get it produced, even by like LGBT festivals that tend to only really focus on gay stories, gay male stories, if we want to be completely honest. And so it's, I guess my answer to that question is that I am constantly aware that that's something I have to be influenced by if I want my writing to have some sort of success. Because the unfortunate truth of the matter is there's not a lot of trans artistic directors, there's not a lot of trans people in leadership positions and we're the people who are focused on bringing these stories, because our stories haven't been of concern to people who are not trans, and that's the truth of it. Even before I transitioned, my focus on trans stories wasn't there. It wasn't until after I transitioned that I said, oh, well, one of the reasons I didn't realize I was trans was because I wasn't exposed to what it meant to be trans. And once I had experience with that, that's when I realized, and that's why this is important. But I don't think cis people realize that, and it's not a priority for them.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, that's a question that I think can be applied to any sort of identity. I think the one that I've struck, well, yes. So the answer is yes. I like struggle with assist gaze, not in my writing because I kind of just write what I write, but the more success I enjoy, the more of a struggle it is for my work to get my work to be made the way I want it to be made, right? And I'll say that as a Black person, like as a queer person, as a trans person, etc. It's a real struggle, especially with these predominantly white, producing bodies. Like should they decide, like, yes, we're going to produce your piece, like that is for me has been like so much um, labor, has required so much labor on my part to like make sure that they're doing things the right way and like et cetera, but also like the people that I'm bringing in, because I have artistic collaborators who work on my work frequently. It's important for me to me that they have that they're protected and they're having the time that they can have, right? So I might not trust the director, but I trust my actors. And so then, like, how can I make sure the actors are having the experience that they need to have, particularly if we have, trans actors in the space? um, so and then getting to reviews, etc., like making sure that your work reaches its target audience, so that you're kind of you're getting the experience that you meant to get as the artist. Like all of that is extremely fraught and difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% resonate with that. And I think all of us can share many, many horror stories about uh, more so the production process than the writing process when it comes to producing this work. Like I can write a play that I think is great, and then they come back with the casting, and I'm like, did you read the play? Um, so I definitely, yeah. To Shannon, your question, it's much more about this gaze comes much more in the production process than in the writing process for me. Um, and then conversely, there are moments when I get to flip that, right? Like a production of mine was happening in the San Francisco Bay Area a couple of years back, and the director, both actors, and I were all trans. We were all in the same room rehearsing like a dress rehearsal. And a question came up around a particular moment of the trans characters kind of recognizing each other. And I like took my customary deep breath to like go through this whole long explanation. And then I was like, oh my God, there's only trans people here. And then I just like told the truth instead of like gave a version of the truth that someone who isn't there would understand. Um, so I definitely think that like who's in the room and who's making decisions has a huge impact on the production and the writing process.
I guess I feel a little bit differently in that I feel like my work is for everybody. And I see my job as giving some comfort to my own community, but also challenging my own community to see blind spots that we might not see, including myself. And then also doing that to whoever is the audience. There is some understanding or comfort for them, but also some challenging of them to see beyond maybe their limitations. And to me, between those two places are where there's the potential for empathy and like common understanding. And so that is one of my priorities when I write. But I mean, I'm aware for sure like what the gaze will be if I'm going to do the play in New York or in America. Then like, is the gaze mostly going to be white? Is it mostly going to be older? Is it like, and then how does that change what I want to emphasize or how I want to push something or cast something? And if I were to do the same play in London or in India, then I might cast it totally different to push people in a slightly different way.
I'd love to pivot a little bit and just hear from all of you. What topics and ideas are you finding yourself really drawn to exploring right now? What are kind of your writing obsessions, if you have them, or things that are coming up in your work that you're excited to explore and dive deeper into?
Right now, I'm working on the play that is being published in how do you pronounce it, Methuen?
Listen, I'm publishing through them. I honestly can't do it, and I spell it wrong every time. I say Methuen. It's something like that.
It's British,
It's
right?
British.
Okay. We'll say Methuen for now. Feel free to use whatever pronunciation you want. But the play that I have published in there is this very like, it's this look at what it means to come to terms with your trauma. So it's very dramatic and very intense. And the things that were important for me about that story is that it was a Southern story, and that it was about this trans Arab Muslim woman. So for me, how that sort of influenced my writing now is that I've written something that is so traumatic, that is about like having conflict in order to reach resolution, that I really wanted to write something that I've never seen before, and that is like a very sweet Southern queer love story. I've never gotten that. Like the closest was Sweet Home Alabama with a side gay character. That's about it. But that meant a lot to me growing up. That little slice meant a lot to me. And so for me, that I think my interest right now is making something that is like queer people being happy in the South. Yeah.
Ezra, did you want to go first?
You go first, Dean.
I'm really interested in, I think, form. So sometimes I'm feeling my way through like place or absurdity or things like that, and then the story tells itself to me. But I think ideas that are percolating in me are things about power and who really has power, and how does us fighting with each other actually keep those powers in structures in place, and how is that deception handled? And restorative justice is very much on my mind and in my research, and something about, I think, how we support it but we don't always live it, and why is that? Like, where does the break happen, in terms of sort of talking about it but not internalizing it or doing it? And then something about like how I'm always a little worried that we're going to turn into the things that we're fighting, and I feel like I see it happen around me. So those are themes that I think I'm constantly ruminating on, and so I know that they will end up showing up in my work, whether I plan it or not. But I try actually not to plan what a thing is about so much as to discover what it is in the writing.
This is a great question because I just I just signed a contract on a new play commission, and so in my head I have this. Thank you. In my head I have this like the like hourglass now that's like, you should be writing, and I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. I trust myself enough now as a writer to know that like I'm kind of in the like things need to go in. I need to find my like way into it thing. And I've endeavored to start doing this thing where I don't give people the brain space until I have the contract or the money, right? So it's just like, they're like, what's it about? And I'm like, I don't know yet. They haven't paid me, so I haven't thought about it. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't, right? So, but anyway, for me, so this thing, oh, I'm doing a really bad job. Okay, there you go. These mushrooms behind me, I'm like really interested in scientific concepts like animals and plant life and like fungus and things. And then I like researching it. And so basically I'll find something that is interesting enough to me that I can spend hours researching it, and I'll kind of just dive into a hole and just like start researching things on the internet and with books and like writing down ideas. And often my story or my structure will come from that. And it might not explicitly be about that at all. Like people are often, they're like, oh yeah, what's this play about like genocide about? And I was like, actually, I was really curious about the difference between rabbits and hares. That's how I started. So, so, so for me right now, I'm kind of just like at that phase where I'm walking around and looking at things and like trying to find. I'm fascinated with this tree that has a really big hole in it. Like um, I'm thinking of that hiding space from, what's the name of that book? To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't even know why. It's because of Lovecraft Country, Atticus. That's why. I was like, why am I even thinking of this? Anyway, yeah, so I'm trying to find my like in where like my brain starts feeling like sped up and I'm like drinking coffee and like typing a lot. That's how I like to start my plays.
Azure, so much respect for the energy of like, I'm not gonna work on your commission till you pay me. Love that energy. I feel like there's two ways that I write plays. Like option number one is I write a play on a dare. Like my friend dared me to write a 10-minute play in a day so she could teach it in a class, and I was like, all right, great, I'll do that. The other way is like I have an idea and it percolates for like a couple of years, and then I write the whole thing in like 2 weeks. So like I had like the idea for my play Dr. Voynich, which is probably my most known play, Dr. Voynich and Her Children. I had the idea for that in like 2013 and didn't put a single word on paper until 2016. And didn't actually, interestingly, I feel like in some ways this is the opposite of you, Azure, where like for me, I put that play was a spreadsheet before I wrote a single word of dialogue. I was like, I know the beats I want to hit. I want to know like who's in what scene. I want to like know the shape of it and know what it's about. And then the words will come naturally from this sort of the point that I feel like I'm trying to make, which is complete opposite of the way that I was taught playwriting, but it like makes sense in my spreadsheet brain.
Just a reminder for folks who are watching, if you have questions and you want us to ask them, please drop them in the comments. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we make sure that we get any of your questions in that you have to ask. I want to go off of Liana's kind of spreadsheet brain, and do you have the same process for every play? Is there a different process for each play? Like, what's your writing process like for all of you?
So I actually wanted to respond to Liana because I also have spreadsheet brain.
Oh, I love it.
And spreadsheet, because I'm also an arts administrator and a grant maker, which is like, yeah, when I get on my like rants and start yelling at producing organizations and like, it's, you know, I'm always just like, actually, I'm an arts administrator and a Virgo, so don't try it with me. Here we go. And without getting into too much like detail, basically, I'm like in chats with someone with an organization about like possibly adapting a YA book into like a serial thing. And so last weekend, I like woke up and was like, I have to make a spreadsheet. I have to make a spreadsheet. And I was like, really? And then I did a cost benefit analysis to like see if I could like let that dragon ride. And then I was like, yes, go. And so then I made a spreadsheet like basically with all the characters and their like canonical like characteristics and like all the, I was like, here are all the like trans themes and here's like the character arcs and I also color my spreadsheet, so it's actually in the colors of the trans flag. So like I make them thematically like the right colors for whatever I'm doing. So yeah, I can start from there. Sometimes I start with a character, sometimes I start with like research, sometimes I'll just be like really obsessed with like, I don't know, some ritual or something. Yeah.
We are speaking the same language. I love that.
To go to the question of writing process, I think for me, I'll get inspired to write like just a thing. So I usually write like a middle scene before I write anything else. And once I'll be inspired by whatever, and suddenly I'll write this thing. I don't necessarily come in with an idea at first. I ask myself, why did I want to write this? What inspired me to write this moment? What is the story? So like Devils Between Us, I wrote the climax scene before I wrote anything else. Yeah. That was the first thing I wrote. And I said, okay, whoa, what's going on here? What is my need? Why am I writing this? What's important to me? What do I want to discover by doing this? And for me, my story is informed as I write it, and I'll write it in sections. And I've tried to be someone who goes in and is organized and maps out like what exactly I'm looking to do, what exactly I'm trying to accomplish. And I find that I'll over-organize myself. And for me as a director, because I'm primarily a director, how I approach work is I let each day inform the next day and inform the next and inform the next. I believe when you try to like stifle creative expression or formulate it, for me as an artist, it tends to neuter that for me. And so I'll oftentimes write something, have to go back and fix something that no longer makes sense. And now I find, especially with the play I'm working on, that I'm being a lot more calculated in how I proceed. It's the first time I'm writing a story chronologically. I wrote the first scene, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. And the interesting dilemma that I'm now at, which I've never been at before, is like what is the conflict that I'm reaching to? Which normally I start from conflict and work my way back. Yeah, I don't know if that was the most simplest answer to that question, but very chaotic, I guess, which it might not be the best thing in the world.
Love it.
I gestate for a very long time. It can be years sometimes, and I often in the last few years it's a place that, and maybe a character or two, and they're in my head for a long time until I write them down. My writing, I feel like, is very musical to me, so I sort of see it as music a little bit, of like which instruments are playing and how many, and are there many, is it quiet, and some of them come out in one shot and some of them are very pastiche. And so each one can be really different. I think it depends on what I'm writing. They're often hard for me to write, and it's a lot of wrestling with myself that happens. And so if I can go away to be by myself and hole up for a month, then that's my ideal way to write a play.
Yeah, I mean, I think I already talked about my process, but the last thing I'll add is like, I have to write several endings every time. Like I write an ending and it's like the day before the reading, and I'm like, throw it out, new ending. I never know how to end a play. I really, really like working with actors, and like actors who are right for the roles and like just are coming from a place. I feel like there are some players who like, this is the vision, actors conform to it, and I'm much more like, I want the like if an actor delivers a line differently than I wrote it, and I'm like, oh my god, that just unlocked something for me, that goes into the play. Like in stage direction, like I changed the stage directions of my play, of one of my very early plays, because my director Olivia Haas did this like genius staging moment. I was like, oh, that's in the play now. Like there's no other way that this play can be done without that. So I do try and incorporate the collaborative process into the final versions of plays.
I'm also going to add, I'm not a spreadsheet person, but I am pretty visual. And so I have white tabs that are just open, and I tend to like spatially see where characters are in relation to each other and draw lines and try and figure out how things are connected. So I guess there's something really spatial about how.
For me, something too is I tend to be really inspired by music. Like as a director, it always informs how I connect to a play. Like I don't find passion in a play until I know what the playlist for it is, for me at least. And I find that like as a director and as a playwright as well, that I tend to get very inspired by music. I have playlists for every single play that I write. It helps me like develop the story and connect with it and feel it on an emotional level.
I feel really blessed because I have a lot of artistic collaborators who work with me. Like they just keep coming back. I mean, I like to think I give them some incentive, but the nice thing is, like, for example, collaborator who directs for me, Kyria Traber. She's directed almost everything that I've written. You know, likewise, I have a stage manager I've worked with and on almost everything I've written. So they start to understand the ethos of my work. Like they understand what it is. They're excited, but like also I don't have to explain certain things. Like some stuff is going to be magical, some stuff is going to be spooky. You know, there will be a lot of stage directions that may or may not be literal. But I think one of the most exciting things is that like they're kind of developing their own like fanfic. Like they have these like theories linking my plays together. And so sometimes like when we get together, they're like, okay, we have a conspiracy theory that links because I have at least one play that occurs in multiple like dimensions, like different universes. They're like, okay, they're all connected. And one of my plays is a spinoff of another play. So it's just really fun. I feel like my artistic collaborators like understand me and they really inspire me. And I never thought that I would like be so accepted and like loved as an artist, to have like a bunch of people that are like willing to come do my work for like a couple of $100 and some popcorn, you know? So yeah, big love for that.
I would love to hear from each of you as you look to the future. What do you see, or what do you dream of when you think of trans art?
Without boundaries. I think that's the biggest thing for me, because I think my greatest frustration, especially when a show moves into production, is difficulty I face. It's something that Liana mentioned before. And, you know, for me, it's like right now I'm going through a process where there's a reading happening and there's the inability to find an actor who is of the experience to read, to read for the lead role, which is a trans Arab woman. And I think the compromises that are continuously asked of trans playwrights, especially by cis artistic directors or cis production managers, the difficulty we're made to feel by wanting to advocate for authentic casting, or just authenticity in storytelling. And diversity isn't just a story. Diversity isn't just on stage. And that for me, when I look to the future of like trans storytelling, I want it to be told without boundaries. I want it to be told with authentically, and I don't want to be told as a playwright, well, we cannot cast someone who's of the experience, so we're going in this direction.
Yeah. That.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Dean first. I'll follow up.
I was just gonna say, I mean, for me, I really want to like I feel like I'm a playwright who's transgender, and I can write about being trans, and I can write about being South Asian, but there's a million other things I can write about too. And I have a very complicated perspective, perhaps because of those identities, and I can bring that complexity to any story I choose to write. But I have the skill and the breadth of experience to write about all kinds of things. And so I would hope in the future, it is not just, oh, we need like that trans playwright, but they will see that we are actually like huge and complex and have a view on the complicated world around us, just like everyone else does, and we will write about everything. So that's what I would like to see.
Yeah. I kind of want to weave together both of your responses. I adore. Yeah. Like the question. Okay. And okay, one thing I think, Sharifa, that I am looking forward to, like this problem that you're having, like, oh, we can't really find someone to do it. Like right now, because we have a lack of trans plays that are being produced, and like a lack of trans plays like that are known by like primarily cis like acting teachers, right? Like we don't have the same base of trans actors to draw upon for most like cis casting directors, right? They're like, oh, I don't know anyone in my city who can do it. I actually hope we end up in a world where like a lot of like developmental readings or like staged readings can be done virtually. I actually think we can kind of solve one problem with another here, where suddenly like we're going to be able to get more trans actors known to the people who have the decision making power. And also like further empowering trans artistic directors like Shannon with resources and grants and support and publicity, so that we can sort of build our own ecosystem of trans writers, directors, actors who are all supporting each other. That's kind of like where I would love to be. Um, and Dean, I absolutely feel you. I feel like for many seasons in the last couple decades, like there's been like the gay slot, sort of like the spring show that like, you know, so season subscribers have already bought their season. So like, you know, they'll say like the fun popular show in the fall and then something dark in the winter and then something gay in the spring. And I'm like, I don't want to have like the trans spot in April. I don't want that. Um, I have a fantasy that at some point the 8 plays that are in our anthology are all going to get done in the same city at the same time, or that like all of our plays will get done across the country in some moment. You know, we've had the entire history of theater dominated by cis people. I would love to have like at least a couple decades dominated by trans artists. I think that'd be really cool.
I also just want to add that systemically, like theaters who are going to produce the play, like should not just produce the one play. They should understand that systemically trans actors and artists are often disenfranchised for many reasons, and should put in the resources to building up fellowships and acting fellowships and writing fellowships and directing fellowships to give people that chance to have as much access as other people do. And I think that's important work that theater institutions can and should be doing.
Yeah, for me, I sort of dream of a takeover, you know, like right now, like I want somebody to just give me their money and their space and go away. Um, because I feel like, I mean, I have my own production company. I have spent many years collaborating with folks, and like I have a trans stage manager who I've like, you know, will bring with me, you know, like anytime I get an opportunity, I'm like, do you have a stage manager? Because I have a preferred stage manager. Here you go. Like, I have my actors, you know, I'm open to meeting new actors, but I also know a lot of actors I've worked with before, you know, and so a lot of times when I roll into a space, I come with like a posse, and I do that on purpose, you know, because I'm just like, no, we're rolling deep, we're doing this. Um, I also think there's something really magical. First of all Black spaces are magical, right? Um, but also there's this magical thing that happens in a majority queer space, queer slash trans space, where I feel like cishet people get to be wholly themselves, right? If they can get over like, you know, any sort of like stumbling blocks that would prevent them from being able to do the work, right? Like there are certain things where it's just like, yeah, like I had an actor once tell me that he thought that the trans character who was a trans man, it was a typo. So I fired him. Um, and because I was just like, you're not ready to do this work, you know. And I went back and was like, was I non-specific? And then I was like, no, I'm very specific. Liana, this was crooked parts. So like if you look at the like
Oh no.
yeah, it's just like I was very specific, like late 20s, like pre-op, like trans. I was like, how is this a typo?
That's the entire goddamn play.
Right. And so he was just like, I was like, did you just do this whole play, like assuming that you were cis?
Oh god.
So, you know, in those instances, it's like compassionately, I say, you are not prepared to do this work. You have blocks, right? Like you cannot imagine a world in which you do not have a penis or like whatever the thing is for you. And like, you know, I release you. But if you're able to step up, then there's so much that you can learn, not only about trans and queer people, but about yourself as a cishet person or whatever you like, whoever you turn out to be in the end. And so, like, I know that like my theater elders, Sharon Bridgeforth, Daniel Alexander Jones, like they took me in when I was just like a mouthy young 20 something, just like running around and saying random shit, you know, like before I knew I was trans, you know, like I was queer, but just like kind of doing whatever. I think it's important to have those experiences in those spaces, and I want to continue to have those spaces available, but prioritizing, of course, the needs of trans people first and foremost.
I think trans leadership is so important. So important. Like we need to have trans people in positions of power within the American theater to actually make decisions that benefit everyone, because trans people tend to be left out of everyone. And for me, like I mentioned before, I'm primarily a director, and one of the reasons that I wanted to be a director was so that I was the leader in the room, so I could make decisions. And for me, I'm always going to do authentic casting, and I'm always going to prioritize voices that I don't necessarily share commonality with, but I will be an ally to those voices. Like, we have to, as leaders, be focused on not just diversity, but inclusivity. And I think where my frustration with the American theater right now is that there isn't that priority for trans voices or for trans people to be in spaces. And oftentimes when they are, it's like a commodity. It's very fetishized. Like when I direct a play, like I just directed, not just, it's been a year. Whew, COVID, a moment. But I directed what's it called? 12th Night at a university. And it was my first Shakespeare that I ever did. And of course I did like a very queer, embracive 12th Night, because that story is queer. It's so queer, but that tends to be leaned away from. And I was like, no, we're gonna dive right in. And the way that play was advertised to the greater public was, ooh, this trans director is coming in and directing this queer story. It was very much like it became a packaged sell versus like, here this experienced director came in to tell this queer play. So for me, as just an artist in general, not only as a playwright, as a director, as everything in between, it's really important for me that we start to see trans people in leadership positions so that they can make decisions that benefit everyone, including trans people.
Yeah, I think this touches on Azure. I actually think I want to credit this idea to you. I actually don't remember 100% whether you were the person who said it, but it was definitely a panel you were on that I was watching. Like the idea of like guest curators for seasons, where like you don't have to completely replace your artistic director to like bring in someone who's gonna like help out with your season selection, like on a temporary basis, like rotating slots where you can have you can actually give decision making power to trans artists, to trans artistic directors, without having to start from scratch, which is like what a lot of us are doing, right? Like I have started this like streaming company where this is like my job now, among many of my other jobs, is to like produce streaming work. And in that, I give huge discounts to BIPOC organizations and to trans organizations. Like I'm not working for free, but like pretty close to it, right? Whereas, if it's an organization that, doesn't actually have equity in its practices, I can, charge them my actual rate, which then allows me to work and, produce our own community's work and allied communities' work with all of the skills that I can bring to bear.
Yes, I do think I said that, Liana.
I thought so. I've been crediting you, so I'm glad to have that confirmed.
Yeah, it's
Love
funny
it.
because when people put me on panels, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. It's probably going to be incendiary, but
that panel was
yeah,
a game changer for me. That was great.
As we close out tonight, I would love for each of you to share anything that you're working on now or coming up next. I know it's a weird time, so you might be writing whatever you've got coming up next. And if people want to find you and your work, where can they do that?
So go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was like, is anybody talking? You go ahead, please.
Right now, I'm currently working on another play called Close to Home, which is the sweet Southern queer love story, which I'm very, very happy about. That's been like a source of relief for me in these COVID moments. And also in the process of The Devils Between Us, which is a play in the Mithuen series, having a reading, which I'm very excited about. It was supposed to have a reading back in June, but because of COVID, that unfortunately got canceled. And I will be starting my MFA in directing at Brown University in 2021, which I am very excited about. And you can find my work at New Play Exchange under my name, Sharifa Yasmin. Yeah.
I'll go. I have a website, so you can go to mashoukmushtaqdeen.com, and usually there are links there to things and a newsletter to sign up for, if that's what you'd like. I had 2 plays that were canceled or postponed this year due to COVID, so the hope is that in the next year they will come to bear. The publication with Methuen is coming up, which is exciting. And so I'm proposing this play about power to various things, but I haven't started writing it yet, and so it's gestating on my mind. But I'm actually working on a memoir at the moment. So in this time of COVID, I'm going internal a little bit and working on a longer prose piece. So we'll see how that goes.
You can find me at lianakeys.com. I'm in the process, while paneling, I'm also streaming right now, so I'm in the process of putting all of these URLs on screen so folks can see them if they want them. Honestly, right now, I'm not focused on writing. I'm focused on like other art forms that are kind of like informing and just like letting me, I don't know. It's, you know, as I mentioned earlier, plays are gestating and they're not there yet. So I'm not going to force it and write something. Like, I know what the next play is. I know what it's about. I know the universe it's in. It's in conversation with another one of my plays. I know that it's about capitalism and class consciousness in an Amazon warehouse. Like, I know these things. But I don't yet know when that's going to be ready to be born. So I'm just going to, you know, take it when it comes. And we can't see it now here in Zoom where we are, but I have now put it up on the stream. So anyone who's watching the stream, all of our websites are there. You know, find us on Venmo, whatever you want to do. You know, Shannon, of course, is at Uprising Theater Company. Mixed Blood Theater Company is the one hosting this, so you can go to their websites as well. Azure, yes, dropping Venmo in the Zoom chat. I'm going to throw that up on screen. Heck yeah. All right. Taking that away. Now I'm making the Venmo text. Someone else talk while I put this up.
Great, I will talk. So as I mentioned, I just got this new play commission and I need to give them the first draft by December 23rd. So I am starting to sort of like pack things in there in my brain. I think of writing kind of like juicing, where like you just like put a bunch of roughage in there and just like keep like plunging, and like eventually some like sweet juice will come out at the end, but it's like 2 tablespoons and you just put in like a bushel of something. So yeah, I'm gestating as and also like, let's be real, it's COVID times, like we're artists, theater is shut down, like I'm also like fielding other opportunities. So right now, while I still have time and my deadline, I'm like trying to make that money, you know, like figure out what's gonna happen, how I'm gonna sustain myself throughout the next seasons. What else is happening? There's something else that I'm forgetting. Oh, right. So my production of Mirrors, which is at Next Door at New York Theater Workshop and was interrupted by the COVID pandemic, was produced by Parody Productions, and we're trying to see if we can film it, COVID allowing. So we'll see. That is up in the air. But I will definitely be writing a new play. I know that much.
I'm just going to add that I had a short Zoom audio play that's published by DPS, so it's out there, and I think they've published like 10 or so for people who are eager to do audio or Zoom plays in this time of pandemic. So those are findable on their website.
Well, thank you all so much for being a part of this tonight, for sharing your stories and your lives. I'm just so grateful for all of you taking the time, and thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched. I really just want to take this moment to encourage folks that are watching, theater makers, audience goers, to hold your theater loved institutions accountable and hold them to the standards of bringing in and elevating trans voices. It's really essential. It's important. And trans and non-binary folks have so much to offer the world, not just in spite of their identities, but because of their identities. And it's a really beautiful thing when trans and non-binary folks can show up and tell their stories. And we would love to have you see more of them. So again, thank you so much for being here. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.